Huntsville's oldest Black-owned business is still serving the community. This business has a history that shines a bright light, even though they're constantly helping people through some of their darkest times. Our city stalwart spent the day at Royal Funeral Home, which is over a century old, and heard how they're making it through a year like no other.
And it actually shows the building. That was the very first building.
Karen Jones-Smith shows us the progression of the Royal Funeral Home business, a rich history stretching back over a century in Huntsville, all starting with one man.
C.K. Benford was one of the sons out of the Benford family. The father passed in 1911, and by 1918, he started Royal Undertaking Company. And it remained Royal Undertaking Company until my grandfather purchased the business, and when they relocated it to the Benford home, it became Royal Funeral Home.
From the ownership of Charles C.K. Benford to the Hunley family after his death, then to the Jones family, Karen Jones-Smith's grandfather, father, and now her.
We have attempted to continue the traditions that have been set by those who have really come before us.
I'm told Royal Funeral Home provides funeral services that may seem unique to some.
People say, well, it's a lot of pomp and circumstance. Well, that's what a
that's in the royal tradition, yes.
Well, that's in any celebration. That's all a celebration is. And that is part of our history and part of our roots.
Since few white undertakers would serve the Black community even up until the end of the 1960s and possibly beyond as prejudice lingered, Black undertakers created independent businesses to fill the need. Royal did just that back in 1918, all while holding true to customs unique to African American and African cultures, like celebrating life with music, stories, and energy as it comes to an end.
Down to when an individual was born in the mother country, we had what we call like a town crier would come out, beating the drums, letting people know that there has been a birth in this community. And it's the same when we have a death, having the celebration.
Though things look different during the pandemic.
At one point we got down to only 10 people could attend the service.
But the pandemic is shedding a light on medical, legal, social, and economic disparities, issues that as a result have long prevented a number of Black families from properly being able to prepare financially for the death of a family member.
There have been inequities long before COVID. We can go back to when our people weren't permitted to purchase insurance. And if they were permitted to purchase insurance, it was insurance that they probably paid more on than the value of the policy.
They walk me through the halls of the funeral home, decorated with over a century's worth of history.
I tell all of our young people, read your history.
For yourself.
For yourself, because it's there in print. And if you read it, you will see what great history you have with your people.
Putting the Valley first, Sydney Stallworth, WZDX News.